Good afternoon. I'm Kirk Harman with the Harman Group, a structural engineering firm headquartered in Philadelphia. I'm also president of the Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat Philadelphia Chapter. I'd like to welcome all of you to our second virtual program, Uber Sky Tower, the Future of Urban Space. Thank you to our sponsors for this program, Bala Consulting Engineers, the Harman Group Structural Engineers, and Langen Engineering and Environmental. We have some upcoming programs in the works when we're able to start in-person meetings again. These include Brandywine Drexel Square, a new public space in the heart of the University City area at 30th Street Station, Dranoff's Art House, a new high-end residential tower now under construction in the middle of the Avenue of the Arts, Aramark's headquarters at 2400 Market Street, a creative reuse and vertical expansion of a former industrial building for a new corporate headquarters on the Schuylkill Riverfront, and the Gallery Philadelphia Fashion District, the repositioning of the gallery into the new Philadelphia Fashion District, and finally Riverwalk, a new mixed-use development along the Schuylkill Riverfront connecting to the Schuylkill River Walk. The Council on Tall Buildings and Urban Habitat is the world's leading resource for professionals focused on the inception, design, construction, and operation of tall buildings in future cities. Please visit ctbuh.org for more information on the valuable resources available from this international organization. The Council, you can become a member of CTBUH at the link shown here in this slide. So now I'd like to introduce Scott Erdy.
How you doing? I hope everybody can hear us. If somebody was on chat, maybe just confirm you can see the screen and hear us all right. That would be great. I'm Scott Erdy. I'm an architect at Erdy McHenry Architecture. I also teach at Penn. I'm helping to run some of the programs here for our Philadelphia chapter. This is very exciting. Janine actually ran across these guys doing this Uber Sky Tower thing, which is very interesting content. And having talked to these guys, it was pretty exciting and seemed like a really good thing to talk about. So first, let me go over the learning objectives for the AIA. For those of you who are in vast need of HSW credits, you're going to learn about three-dimensional intermodal transportation and its effect on urban space and contemporary urban planning and design. You're going to learn about emerging technologies related to new modes of terminal and transportation design, including risk mitigation for this new building type. You're going to be able to conceptualize new ways urban space becomes more three-dimensional and how it might affect real estate values in the vertical realm. And you're going to become familiar with the potential construction technology satisfying code, life safety, structural requirements in this new type of building construction. So we've got two great guests here today. John Pickard, he's from the Midwest, where he would be called Pickard there. And he's the principal of Pickard Chilton, a very interesting firm up in New Haven, right?
That's correct.
And they do a lot of really interesting things. In particular, the one we're going to talk about today is they were invited by Uber to prepare concept of design for their megaport. So it's their vision of kind of the new next generation of really aviation and expansion of what they currently do in terms of transportation for individuals. He received his bachelor's from Iowa State University, his master's from Yale. Very good school. He's lectured at a number of institutions and serves on Yale's School of Architecture Dean's Council. Andrew Swartzell is an associate and director of computing technology at Pickard Chilton and does a lot of things. I imagine he's the one doing a lot of the heavy lifting on some of the data intensive illustrations that you'll see. So he's from Penn State University for his undergrad. Got the Alpha Rho Chi Medal, and he got his master's degree from University of Pennsylvania. Congratulations, a very good school as well. So with that, we're going to let these guys go. Very exciting, so sit back and enjoy the Uber ride.
Thanks very much, Scott. We are really honored to be here this afternoon and share the Pickard Chilton Arup vision for Uber Elevate. Uber is committed to transforming urban aviation. And really what they're doing is they're leveraging their mastery of ground transportation, and they're applying that expertise and providing freedom for all of us to navigate through the skies. So I want to start here to just give you a glimpse forward in just a very short couple of years, probably 2023, you'll have an experience where you can come to a facility like this using your UberX and be magically and quietly and cost effectively whisked away, bypassing the tyranny of the roads and being able to find your way to an appropriate destination. So their hypothesis is nicely underscored in this image you see here. Why Uber Elevate? Well, it's really very simple. In San Francisco, if you're trying to get to a meeting in Silicon Valley, today you have to plan on potentially being caught in traffic for a couple of hours, or Caltrain for a couple of hours. With the miracle of Uber Air, or Uber Elevate, which is an eVTOL, you'll be able to go from a skyport at San Francisco International, magically whisk and land in the heart of Silicon Valley. And that's what we're trying to share with you today. So what Uber has done is they've been able to take their incredible analytics. You can appreciate that Uber has the ability to track on a daily, hourly, minute by second where the demand is and how do they best serve their customers. And we'll be able to use that information in strategically locating the new skyports that we're going to share with you today.
So this whole initiative started in 2016 when a team was assembled at Uber to form Uber Elevate. And they published, right off the bat, they published this white paper, which is available at uber.com/elevate.pdf for anybody who is really interested in getting into the nitty-gritty of this. And what they set out to do right from the start is to form a contingent of interested parties to come together and make this new mode of transportation a reality.
Do I have the ability to, if you don't, I'll advance it. There we go.
So the vehicles that they're going to be operating on this network were really the first thing that they tried to tackle. And before we get into the skyports and the vision 10 years in the future, I'm going to go quickly through some of the background information and the details about what kind of craft are flying on this network. If you think about the current state of cities, they've been radically transformed by the automobile, and one could expect that the introduction of another mode of transportation in the third dimension is going to have some sort of impact on how cities continue to be planned and developed. The first thing that they decided was that helicopters are not the right answer. This diagram is simply to say, it shows the inefficiencies in the design of a helicopter. They're very versatile aircraft, but if you're trying to go 60 miles, that forward direction is really, it's counteracting the lift that you get from the blade rotating. So the blade has to rotate faster than it would if it were an aircraft propeller or something, and the lift were being coming from the wings. And so what Uber did is they hired Mark Moore, who was with NASA and exploring all sorts of different aircraft designs for years, vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. These are a few designs of what we call VTOLs. And he's particularly interested in a technology called distributed electric propulsion, or DEP. And what that does is it takes this, these gearboxes and cross shafts out of the design of the aircraft, and each propeller basically has its own motor. It makes it more redundant and it makes it safer, ultimately. This is the aircraft that the Uber Elevate engineering team has come up with. And you can see that there are two tilt rotors, is what you would call them, on the ends of the wings. And then there are 4 more rotors that provide additional lift during takeoff and landing. And the interesting thing about this is that Uber is investing a lot of time and energy into the design of this aircraft. And yet the only aspect of this that is going to be replicated in reality is the cabin. Uber, of course, is very interested in the comfort of their passengers, the passenger experience, and they'd like it to be consistent among all the providers of the aircraft. So this was a cabin design that was mocked up and premiered at last year's Uber Elevate Summit. These are the aircraft partners that are going to be developing the devices that actually fly, and these are images of the craft as of last year. What these companies are in the works developing. In the meantime, Uber is testing out their apps with a service called Uber Copter, which flies from Manhattan to JFK. I think anybody in Manhattan, if they're trying to take a trip from Manhattan to JFK, would see Uber Air as an option on the app if they're trying to book a ride to the airport. They're also testing out some of the autonomous technology that will eventually power the aircraft with their Uber Eats platform, and they're in the works testing out drone delivery in San Diego right now. And of course, the aircraft are flying.
The key thing to remember is it's the technology is there. It's being refined, but it's there, and it's not something. This is not George Jetson. This is reality. It will change our world.
And in 2023, that is the target that Uber has set for the beginning of their flight operations, commercial flight operations. And so, again, before we get into the Sky Tower, I'm going to talk a little bit about the launch. They're going to launch in Dallas, Los Angeles, and last year they announced that they would be launching in an international market in Melbourne, Australia. And we were invited to design one of those initial skyports for 2023 in Melbourne. We came up with a system that could be applied in the Yarra River and the Docklands neighborhood of Melbourne, and again also at the Melbourne International Airport. That seemed like a good way to start the network. You'll have passengers coming into the airport and they need to get downtown. That'll cut an hour off your trip. And the program for this particular hub is more modest than what we were seeing before, at just 7 aircraft and 100 cars, 100 bikes, 100 scooters. And what they asked us to do is to figure out how to add one of these skyports on top of an existing parking garage. It's a piece of urban infrastructure that is there, and they wanted to make more use of it. And so what we've done is we've added a flight deck, if you will, to the top, an extra level to the parking garage. and provided a programmatic wrapper along the street front that activates the street. So it's a responsible urban intervention, I'd like to think. On the ground floor, we've taken over some of the spaces in the garage for parking of electric, Uber, autonomous driving cars, bikes and scooters, cafe, and some maintenance facilities. And if you're a passenger on this network, what you would do if you arrive at the Sky Tower or at the Skyport here, you would go in the Skyport lobby, rise up the elevator or take the stairs up to wait for a brief time at the Skyport Lounge. There are two landing pads, which you would call FADOs or T-lofts, and there's a required separation to allow for simultaneous operations. So two aircraft can land at the same time on these two landing pads if they're spaced this far apart. And then to maximize operational flexibility, there's a taxiway that goes around the entire perimeter of the rest of that flight deck, and the aircraft would taxi in to be close to the Skyport Lounge. Those little lines that radiate out from there are dedicated paths where passengers would walk and be guided basically to their waiting aircraft. And this would all be taken care of and done through an app. Uber, of course, is conscious and very aware and committed to making sure that whatever form this new mode of transportation takes, it has as little impact as possible on the local community. And that speaks to the context that you'll end up finding these skyports in. They may or may not appear on the top of new construction. They may very well appear on the top of existing parking garages here. And in this case, and in the case of the Sky Tower, you'll see that we've been strategic in locating it near existing urban transit infrastructure. There's a rail yard here, and there are some highways. The other thing that is going to be important in the development of these skyports in future cities is the flight paths that are necessary to get aircraft in and out of the skyports. You can see that these are the approach and departure paths as mandated right now by FAA's helicopter planning guidelines. And these regulations might change with the development of these new aircraft, but what we have to work with and what everyone has to work with at the moment are the existing regulations. And so you can see that will impact the height of future development in adjacent parcels. And here's an image again of the street front. You can see the bikes and scooters. And these skyports are really meant to be as plugged into and integrated with the community as possible. There's additional amenities that are provided to Uber's driver partners. This is a view of their green light lounge. And there are certainly amenities provided to the passengers in a waiting lounge. I think since this is all driven by an app, the wait is not going to be as long, we think, as it is right now at an airport. Arrival an hour beforehand is probably not going to be a consideration here in these skyports. And here you'll just see a few more views of the tarmac. And one of the interesting things about this is that it really harkens back to the early days of aviation when you would walk out on the runway and board an aircraft the way that we don't now. And so there's something that's romantic about that. You've seen in all those images that that we have selected a mass timber structure for the structural system, and there are a number of reasons why we would do that. It's sustainable, it's prefabricated, it's biophilic, it's lighter than steel and concrete, since we're adding to an existing garage, and of course it has fewer emissions than the production of steel and concrete. And so what we've done, this is a conceptual design, and so these are round numbers, let's say, but we've estimated that we've used about 95,000 square feet, or cubic feet of wood. That equates to about 3,000 metric tons of CO2 offset. And to put that in perspective, that would be the equivalent of 650 cars off the road for a year. This is one building, and this is but it's one building in a network, and that network is going to be at least two, certainly more, numbering in the dozens, tens of dozens eventually. And now I think we'll just take a quick flight to the airport and then a very long flight. What, 5 years into the future to Los Angeles, and John can talk a little bit about what we had proposed for Los Angeles in 2028. You can take control, John.
Okay, do I need to?
You might have to play.
Yeah, I was going to say, okay. It's not advancing. There we go. So Andrew just talked about what we refer to internally as Skyloft, and it's achievable. It's achievable today. Interestingly, when Uber reached out to us a few years ago, they actually challenged us to look out a decade or more. They actually attacked the problem by saying, how do we solve the real problem, which is assuming we're going to be successful, how do we manage a profoundly different throughput? A low throughput, with all due respect, easy peasy. But what they did is they painted a very, very challenging picture. And they decided after this analytics that there would be a few metropolitan areas where a facility like the Sky Tower we're about to reveal will be an essential way of allowing Uber to best meet their customers' needs. And so the challenge they gave to us was, we want to be able to land 1,000 craft every hour, take off 1,000 craft every hour. So we're managing 10,000 passengers per hour. They were also wise enough to recognize that the sites that this is going to want to occur in are very valuable. We're not talking about out in the suburbs of Dallas-Fort Worth. We're talking about in the heart of our major American cities. And so what they did, which made the problem wonderful for the Arup and Pickard Chilton team, was they said, by the way, the site's only 3 acres. So good luck. And so what does that mean? Well, to kind of get our brains around it, we looked, of course, at Los Angeles. And the LAX handles about twice the throughput that Uber was requesting. So 20,000 passengers per hour. But my goodness, they do it on 3,500 acres. And so we have that little speck on the right is our site. So less than 0.1% of the land area to achieve, half the throughput. And so you can appreciate it was quite a challenge. And we scratched our heads for a bit of a time. So the puzzle starts off with the Uber team and their technical advisors had determined that we can probably land craft at a maximum rate of 3 craft per minute, or each craft every 20 seconds. That's about it. So that's landing. We can do the same thing in the takeoff. That all makes sense. Where it gets tricky is the board and the charge time. Andrew talked about the batteries, and today the battery technology is advancing, but we have to allow each of these electric vertical takeoff and landing craft an opportunity to take a little sip of power when they land. And what we don't expect them to recharge to 100%, but take a little sip. And it's going to take approximately 5 minutes to do that. Well, it also takes approximately 5 minutes to disembark the passengers and load up. And it's that time that's the biggest challenge in kind of managing throughput. So, you know, we've talked about how we've got these, every 5 minutes we've got 15 landings. And that's a good start, but that doesn't do it. But that little yellow zone shows what 3 acres look like. So it can handle that kind of a throughput. It cannot handle the 1,000 throughput landings that Uber required. So what do? We had to think differently. And the solution was to work 3-dimensionally. And I have to tell you, although looking back now, I say, well, this is so obvious. But when we were starting this a few years ago, it wasn't so obvious. And some of the breakthroughs came with one of our colleagues at Arup, was a former military helicopter pilot, and helped us to think about breaking down the vertical dimension. And that was one of the keys to the solution we're about to share with you. And so what we have is, you'll land on the T-loft, the vehicle will move a few feet over to the mobile charging platform, and it will descend down into the system. People will disembark and load up. Now, one of the things we're positing is there'd be a little element. As soon as the craft is on the mobile charging platform, you lock in. So the entire time the craft is there, it's taking that sip of power it needs to be able to do its job and move on to the next trip. So that's really the breakthrough. And so then what we needed to do is we said, okay, well, that's a module, but we need to increase the throughput. And I'm not going to waste too much of your time about all the details of how we solve the architecture and vertical transportation, but you can understand, you know, the Arup and the Pickard Chilton team, we designed a mile-high tower in the heart of the Middle East. So this is a relatively straightforward challenge to solve some of these problems. And so what we did is we took that module, and in order to get the throughput, you do the arithmetic, you need 5.5 modules or 6 modules. And so that's really, that creates the prototype that we felt can be now within the issues of the site, the specifics of the context, the politics, zoning, flight approach patterns, and of course cost. Those will be the elements that ultimately will drive what we can expect to see in maybe another decade or so. And so you sort of say, well, how would that work in the heart of a major metropolis? I think for us, we're positing as the most thoughtful, respectful way to begin would be the image on the upper left shows, it's a little difficult to read, but it shows the sky tower perched above a overpass on an interstate system. Obviously, that overpass would be enhanced. And what that allows us to do is it allows us to really integrate back into the city. One of the things that Uber is also particularly concerned about is not only safety, because safety to their customers and safety of the city is paramount, but as a part of it is not making an undue impact on the acoustical environment within our metropolitan areas. And so by locating a sky tower over an existing expressway, we begin to mitigate that. And of course, this is just looking forward to some of potentials, a little tongue-in-cheek. I'm not sure this would really happen in the heart of historic London, but you can see that it also raises a potential, which is in most of our studies, it's really solely about the sky tower Uber issue. It's my belief that when these facilities are unveiled, that they will be a part of an integrated development, meaning there will be probable retail, office components, hotel, residential. So like so many of the mixed-use transit-focused centers that Pickard Chilton is designing today, this will be a kind of a next-generation facility. And whether it's London or on a slightly more moderate basis here in the heart of Ross Perot's Victory Center in Dallas, you know, the Sky Tower can make a big difference as it feeds these metropolitan areas. So here you are, you're on the interstate, you're approaching it. You've got the 3 T-lofts before you. Those round things are the the gardens, and we'll talk a little bit about a garden at the base and a garden in the air for the customers to experience. And one of the secrets to the throughput is how do you organize the craft coming in? And so we've created, the FAA has limitations on aircraft separation. Those limitations are typically horizontal. We're applying them into the vertical dimension. And so as people load into the Sky Tower, you'll have 3 aircraft that are in each of those positions. And then phased 20 seconds behind it, you'll have another 3 aircraft coming in. So no aircraft is ever above another one. They're always slipped off to the side. And then in order to get the throughput, one will have to have an extremely carefully managed system. So what you're seeing here is the top image is a section, and the bottom is a plan. You're watching the craft land into the Sky Tower, and there's a leg. This is 20 times the speed, the real speed. So there's a lag here as they're doing the 5-minute recharge. And then here in a few moments, you'll see the aircraft. They've done the passenger boarding up, and they'll start to launch out and head off to their destination. So the Sky Tower does lots of things well. It keeps the aircraft up and away from other people, but it also does a great job of protecting the acoustic environment. And so those little bubbles reflect the 67 dB target that we hit. And so even today, if you're standing, let's ignore the existing sound of traffic. If you're standing at the base of the Sky Tower, you'll barely hear it. It's the equivalent of an electric Prius driving by at 35 miles an hour. You know, it's going to be very, very quiet. So here we are. We've got a sort of a dynamic view of the Sky Tower. And what's important is how the Sky Tower can really lock in to the character of the cities. And of course, as design architects, and we spend much of our energy designing skyscrapers, you know, it's very important that this is a building that contributes to the positive vitality and character of the city. And we believe that the Sky Tower will absolutely do that. And of course, it's important that the customer and the customer experience is fabulous. So it'll be located, in the case of this study, on the metro line in Los Angeles. So you're seeing those escalators that bring you up into the ground floor. You can see the UberX queuing up there on the ground plane. It'll be integrated to the buses, bikes, you know, everything comes together in this facility. And then finally, you'll unload safely with the electric cars. And then what we wanted to do is, because we're creating this, why not provide a garden to the community that would provide a positive experience for the customers and a positive experience for the adjacent neighbors. And so as you move through the system, you come out of your UberX, you're in this beautiful environment, you're protected from the climate, but we're not propositing we build lots of fancy, expensive, unnecessary terminals like you might in a major airport. You're basically moving through the garden. Now, Los Angeles and their climate allows that to happen a little more easily. So you'll move through that. And then here, we have a beautiful garden at the base. We have a beautiful garden in the sky. As Andrew mentioned, we don't expect that you're spending a lot of time there, because the app system should be very efficient. But even the few minutes that you might spend there, we want to make it beautiful and uplifting. And then ultimately, the thing that we're excited about is, in order to manage the throughput, we literally have these craft that are parked for a few minutes to allow for the charging, but the boarding process is fully protected. So you're out of the flight deck, you're down below, so passengers can flow out and get into their craft safely. And then finally, we want to share this image or this video with you. This is a bit of a sense of what it would be like to experience Uber Elevate. And what you're seeing, the video was created by Uber to kind of paint that picture. It starts off, and I believe they actually posited that it would be lifting off from their headquarters in San Francisco. Again, I've been in the cabin. It's like flying first class. I mean, the real first class, the old kind of first class. It's very, very quiet, very smooth. So here you are flying through San Francisco. Caesar Pelle's beautiful Salesforce Tower in the background. And this video is created as though you're flying to Santa Clara or one of the destinations down there. Now you can see how it's gone from vertical to horizontal, fly through the clouds, and then magically the sky tower will begin to emerge in the mist. There you see it in the mist, and the craft will quietly come in, and it's going to be beautiful. So the craft lands and literally will slide over onto the elevated platforms, and then come down, descend into the bays. And of course, you can appreciate we're able to leverage the sophisticated technology and automated parking to make this happen. So all the technology you're seeing is rational, and it's been tested and being refined. And then obviously, you know, we have a very happy Uber customer. But I must tell you, a lot of people, when they look at this, they kind of roll their eyes and they think that this is something out of the Jetsons, because some of us of a certain age grew up with that. And what I think it's important to share with everyone is it's happening. It's now, and it's much, much sooner than you might think. And so with that, Scott, I turn it back to you and invite any questions that our participants may have.
Yeah, we have a few questions on the board so far, so please type in questions and we'll probably have a chance to get to all of them. I just had a question to start out with, and maybe it's more of a question about your sense as an architect. You know, if you think about Uber, their current model, it's a very dispersed system, right? Where it actually is less, it's nearly invisible, right? Uber is nearly invisible right now until you get very proximate to it, because it's dispersed throughout the city, right? So they're picking up from all different locations. In this case, they come together to some of these single towers, right? What's your sense about the effect on, like, call it the ground plane or the pedestrian scale environment around these centers?
Well, I think it's an amazing opportunity. And I think one of the, if this was a research project, what comes next? Well, what comes next is a better understanding, integration of the potential of the Sky Tower into the heart of the city. And so we've been fortunate. We're working with East Japan Railway on what's the largest private development in Tokyo right now. And this kind of a facility has the potential to change everything. I don't know why, if you have literally thousands and thousands of people coming to the Sky Tower every day, that you would not take advantage of that. And that would become an opportunity for workplace, residential, retail. And it may not be specifically or physically in the Sky Tower, but it would certainly be adjacent. But it also might be in the Sky Tower. We'd have to look at the cost benefit of that. I think that's the real opportunity. And this study has not yet tapped that potential.
Yeah, I think you mentioned earlier the potential of this becoming integrated programs, right, with other building typologies, like whether it's housing or offices, whereas it becomes the roof deck or some extension of that. Because if you think about when Andrew was showing the first one over top of the parking garage, it looked a lot like, if you look at the history of naval design, right? The idea of the first aircraft carriers were kind of like a deck on top of something else, right? Mm-hmm. But I think it's this this typology of evolution of the prototype. I think is very interesting. We got a couple of questions. I'll start getting to some of these. One of these: how does Uber address ADA accessibility into the craft itself? Has that been discussed?
Yeah, it has, and I don't think we've got a crisp answer. I know there's going to be a way. There'll probably be a little platform that will allow you to get up into the cabin, because I don't think there's any way around. It's going to be nominally 2 feet off the flight deck. You can appreciate, I mean, Uber is so committed to making a positive customer experience that we'll get that solved. But we don't have the details. But there's no, put another way, it will be solved. There's no way we would put a system like this out without having that appropriate result. And of course, everything else throughout the Sky Tower, of course, will exceed all ADA expectations. Right. But that's the last little thread that we have to reconcile.
Yeah, understood. The another question was, are they piloted or are they autonomous vehicles? And where is that in the process?
They're piloted initially. In order, well, autonomous technology isn't there yet. It's not going to be there in 2023, and they want to get this out off the ground. But the plan is that all the aircraft that are being developed right now will have the brains to operate autonomously eventually. And so as technology advances, as that develops, I think you'll see them become autonomous. And that was certainly a one of our assumptions in flying into the sky.
Let me elaborate a little bit, because I think an important thing to share. A lot of people probably wonder, okay, this Uber Elevate thing is for the 1% folk. That's not the vision. Eric Allison heads Uber Elevate, and they have been very focused on creating a system that can allow the world to engage with Uber Elevate. Now, in order to do that, and in order, you can appreciate the price will probably start here, and as the system rolls out, the price will come down as the volume increases. A key part of that, the reason I bring this issue up on this question, is the pilot. And do you have a pilot? And I think it's fair to say that there will be a time, both generationally, when the passengers will have no expectation of a pilot, and when the technology is absolutely there, that they will be autonomous. And it's when they become autonomous that the price structure can be the most competitive, and that it doesn't have to be restricted to the top 5% or whatever it may be. It'll be available to all of us.
Sure. Let's stick with that issue for a minute. I have a question from Kevin talking about in your meetings with the FAA or whomever's interfacing with the FAA, the assumptions about the horizontal spacing and the three-dimensional spacing, that is very interesting. And I think it comes back to that question of autonomous, right? Because in some ways, I think I might be more comfortable getting into a craft that was autonomously flown, right? Because it's part of a network that's managing it itself, right? So has there been any discussions with the FAA about?
Oh, absolutely. Well, first of all, let me roll it back. The first project we showed you, the one in Melbourne, Australia, is what's likely to emerge initially. Mm-hmm. And everything around that is totally consistent with FAA guidelines and vis-a-vis helicopter piloting. There's nothing there that's particularly unusual. Having said that, you can appreciate Uber has been in active conversation with FAA for the last several years. They recognize, and the FAA recognizes, that this needs to be a partnership. This is a whole change in the world. So in the initial rollout, I don't think it's going to be an enormous challenge. But as it becomes more sophisticated, you get into systems like the Sky Tower, where you've got a very critically organized spatial arrangements, that will have to be considered. And honestly, this gets into things that go beyond Andrew and my pay grade, because it turns out the whole flight approach system is well below there. I think the aircraft cut off at, I'm going to say, 1,000 feet or something. There's no really detailed data below that. So that whole system is going to have to be worked through with the FAA. And of course, nobody is suggesting that we're going to be piloting these electric vertical takeoff landing craft through skyscrapers to find their way into the skyport. I mean, that's just not going to happen. It's going to be safe. And so that alone will be a big factor in site selection.
One of the things you brought up in that section diagram showing the throughput, and Frank asks the question, what's the noise compared to a helicopter?
Oh, it's much, much less. Yeah, I mean, it's literally, because I'm not smart enough to get my head around what 67 dB is, but I've been told that it's approximately equivalent to an electric car at 35 miles an hour. Yeah. And that noise of the electric car really comes from the tires on the pavement. So
if the asker is able to translate decibels into their lived experience, a typical helicopter, a light helicopter, is 85 decibels.
Gotcha.
And they're targeting 15 decibels lower than that. So 70 is kind of their maximum target. And they're researching all sorts of different technology that we weren't even privy to, like noise canceling technology, things like that.
Yeah. And so, what's the range of the aircraft? And how many do you see in a particular city? What's the density that might be achieved by this?
You can appreciate it's going to start. It'll start slow, to get this thing. In fact, they're already doing quiet testing in some target markets. The range is 60 miles. That will grow as the technology evolves, but they're using that 60 miles. And you know, I don't think Uber has yet decided when they launch it, how many will they launch with. I mean, that's a rather nuanced business decision.
Mm-hmm. And then I think we talked yesterday a little bit about this. Has TSA gotten their hands on this yet?
Yeah, you know, I don't know. That would be a great question for the folks at Uber. But you'd like to think, because the craft can't be hijacked, presumably, certainly if it's an autonomous mode, that's not an issue, but you never know.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying that safety is a very high priority.
Highest priority.
And so any accident that would happen would
that's
be disastrous for
you. Have to, safety is safety. But I will tell you, of course, we've been working with Uber for a few years, but this is an amazing organization. I mean, it's led by Derek Khosrowshahi, is an amazing CEO. The leadership team that we've dealt with, you know, the project lead that we've dealt with, John Badalamenti, is amazing. I mean, it's a great company, and if I were ready to invest, this is a company that I would. The future is going to be stronger with Uber. We are completely convinced that they've got the dedication and the discipline to pull this off.
Yeah,
I would argue there are other people that are going to move into this field, I'm sure, but I think Uber's meaningfully ahead of their competitors.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you think about how they've transformed transportation in cities, right? It's been pretty amazing. And if you recall, there was a lot of opposition in the beginning, right, by local cab companies, et cetera. And, you know, now Uber's the largest cab company in the world that don't own a single taxi, right?
Right.
So I think it's all about the logistics of that, which is very interesting. Is there an assumption that about there being a local or regional monopoly on these things in terms of competing sky towers?
No, actually, you're asking an interesting question. I don't think, and I may be wrong, so I don't think Uber wants to be in the real estate business. I mean, many of the people on the call have deep respect for the challenge of real estate. I think what may happen is Uber may structure relationships with some of the most respected developers. So I'll probably get in trouble here, but in Philadelphia, they may be talking to Brandywine because it's such a great company to help them figure out how to solve this problem. Or, you know, in Dallas, Fort Worth, I can tell you they're talking with Ross Perot and the Hillwood team, who's they're friends and clients of ours. So they'll do a partnership. And I think they're also astute enough to know there will be competitors in this market. And so let's just assume that somebody else comes in, Lyft, whatever. I think the Sky Tower facilities would be available to all of those competitors. Now, I'm speculating here, but that's my suspicion.
There are some specific vehicle requirements that any competitors would also have to meet.
Right.
Like in particular, because these are electric, compatibility with the charging system.
Yeah,
they would have to be able to plug in.
But I don't think Uber is naive enough to think that there will not be a competitor. I mean, we live in a competitive world. But what they've learned in their ground game is get in there first and do it well and control the market. So.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. Philip asked a question here about have you reviewed, or you probably can't answer this, but have you reviewed any air rights for certain locations where you could go in there? You know, if you think about real estate and speculation, now there's a potential for speculation of the air rights, right? Below that FAA controlled airspace, right? So is there a discussion about that?
No, I mean, it's a great question. It's coming. It's at the point, there are going to be people that will be all over this thing when it's kind of right in front of them.
Yeah.
And it will have an impact on land values, I'd like to think positively around it. But what we'll have to be careful, and Andrew mentioned it, you know, we've got to pay attention to the approach patterns, because that will, you know, it will have to cap further development. So let's, a lot of these cities, particularly we do a lot of work in Texas, and I love Texas because it's a great capitalist environment, but there are not a lot of height restrictions. So at some point in time, if the flight approach path is here, it's gonna have to cap.
Well, yeah, and, hence the reason an autonomous vehicle would be great that could actually avoid a new obstruction, right? That hasn't yet made it to the FAA sectional map, right?
Exactly.
A lot of great questions about the sort of the buildingness of it, life safety, all those things, which I think are fairly straightforward in this building. But what happens if there's some sort of weather event or emergency event where you have to land, 10 to 20,000 vehicles immediately?
We haven't worked it through. I mean, clearly, if there's a weather event, you'll shut down the system is what would happen, like any aviation issue. But you can appreciate this is an amazing throughput, and but if something's going on, if there's a tornado that comes and is going to hit Dallas-Fort Worth, because you're really not in the air very long. You're in the air max maybe 15, 20 minutes. Basically, they'll bring everybody to grade and shut it down.
You'd have to be able to store all those aircraft that are floating around, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's a question that I'm not sure that anyone really knows exactly what's going to happen there. There would be some sort of storage facility. There would have to be, because they're not going to be in the air 100% of the time.
But we also have additional capacity here, which we won't bore you with, but there's a kind of a service bay below that. In the image on the screen there's kind of a dark zone below the parking bays, and that's actually where you can take one of the vehicles and bring it down and take it out of service, give the bay back over for the live craft, and perform any service that you may need down there. So there's a little additional capacity. But if a tornado is going to hit Dallas, then they would probably take the craft and park it at DFW or their emergency landing field.
Yeah. And so a couple of people have asked questions just to review that. What you said in the lecture was that they can accommodate 4 passengers now. There is a pilot that's there to just guide the vehicle if something goes wrong.
Right.
So ultimately, these vehicles will be sized for 5 passengers, and they have about a 60-mile range. So you can imagine that spread out even through, I'm sure in Los Angeles there would be a lot of locations you'd like to have these sort of heliports or Uber ports in there, right? So very interesting. I think that the big question for us as architects and as urban habitat people is really this sense about how it will change the city and how can we anticipate that, right? Because it suddenly takes a ground plane, which is all pedestrian oriented, right? What we see and understand, it elevates that now there's going to be a spatial construct, which is 3-dimensional and participatory, right, by the user. So I think it opens up a whole range of possibilities and issues that I think will be very exciting for architects to be thinking about.
Absolutely. But what's interesting too is it's driven by the analytics that they're developing right now. I mean, literally, millions of people are moving around every day in Uber ground transit. So they're establishing these kind of digital maps of these metropolitan areas, and those digital maps are going to inform where is an intelligent spot for skyport. And then there'll be an overlay about what makes real estate sense. What's realistic? There may be some highly desired spots in a major city that is just impractical, that the real estate would not permit a skyport. And then we'll have to go to plan B. But what will happen is at the point we've identified there's going to be a skyport, then you're going to see this ripple. And the ripple is going to extend out, but it'll be dynamic. I mean, it's going to, because it can change so quickly. It's not like building a underground subway system that it's under construction for a decade. This is going to roll out, rather quickly. So
yeah, it's a very autonomous infrastructure in many ways because the pipeline that it creates between its ports, right, is variable. So
yeah, that's right.
It's a very open-ended, just like an Uber car is now. And I think that as these things start to roll out. So has there been any talk about what it's going to cost in Melbourne? That's going to be the first chance to see it, right?
No, and in fact, just to be honest, we have not been commissioned by a Melbourne real estate firm to do the project. We'd love to be, but we have not been. But in the Skyloft, the first project that Andrew showed, you can appreciate the economics are going to be very straightforward. We're designing probably as many or more mass timber buildings as anyone on the planet. Right now, we have over 3 million square feet of projects on the boards in mass timber. And mass timber is an amazing sort of potential. It's cost effective, it's beautiful. And so what we showed you with Skyloft is perfectly reasonable. In fairness, the Sky Tower, maybe not so. I mean, you have to, that is, you know, we do skyscrapers. That's what we do. That is far more costly than a Skyloft. And you would only do that in a situation where the throughput was so important and the land was so limited that that was the only solution, because that's going to be more costly. And it might only happen in a few places in the world. Other facilities might be on 6 acres and much lower, and we'll have to work that through.
Yeah.
But, the challenge was they threw out the gauntlet to say, okay, you got to do it all in 3 acres, and that was the result.
No, it's super interesting. A lot of the questions are trending towards, you know, this idea of adapting it into other building types, right? So you can imagine, just like now at the airport, there's dedicated Uber pickup spots, right? In cities and in different large buildings. So one could imagine these things starting to really disseminate. It might be that a heliport or one of these ports has maybe a throughput of, you know, maybe 10 per hour or something like that. But it's really like, if you think about how many Uber vehicles there are, and, you know, they do reduce traffic, right? Because, you know, the trips are being consolidated. So I think it's super interesting in terms of what that is. It's been a fantastic conversation. I apologize to, like, there's like, I don't know, 25 questions still hanging out here that we haven't gotten to yet. Some of them have been answered so far. Could these people reach out to you and ask additional questions if they like?
Sure, of course.
All right, so Pickard Chilton, they're up in New Haven. I'm sure you can get on their website and see more about this and reach out and ask John for a job if they're so inclined.
Exactly.
Or if you're a client that's looking for a heliport or a skyport, that would be, I'm sure, even more interesting to John. So thank you so much. It's been a wonderful and very interesting topic, and I'm so glad that you guys were willing to speak to us and all the people that are listening online. So this will be this has been recorded, and it will be available on the CTBUH website. So give it about 4 or 5 days. And I want to thank Heather Spray for navigating us through this, Janine Lamarca for being the communications person for our Philadelphia chapter. And Philadelphia is going to keep bringing you guys some interesting topics that are forward-looking about urban space and how cities are transforming. So great job. Congratulations. And we really appreciate you spending time with us.
Excellent. It's our honor. Thanks so much, Scott.
Thank you. Thank you, Kirk, for leading us all.
Okay. Take care, everybody. Okay. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.